Jesus, I surrender all to Him. I freely give. I will ever love and trust Him in
The 25th of December 1899, Volume 3. Jesus wants a continuous attitude of sacrifice in the soul. After spending several days of almost total privation of my highest and only good, days accompanied by hardness of heart, without even being able to cry over my great loss, though I offered to God even that loss, saying to Him, Lord, accept it as a sacrifice. You alone can soften this heart of mine so hard. Finally, after long suffering, my dear Queen Mama came, carrying the celestial baby on her lap, wrapped in a little cloth, all shivering. She placed him in my arms, telling me, My daughter, warm him with your affections, because my son was born in extreme poverty, in the complete abandonment of men, and in highest mortification. Oh, how pretty he was, with that celestial beauty of his. I took him in my arms, and I clasped him to myself to warm him, because he was almost numb with cold, since he had nothing else to cover him but one little cloth. After I warmed him as much as I could, my tender little baby, moving his purple lips, told me, Do you promise me always to be a victim for love of me, just as I am for love of you? And I, Yes, my little treasure, I promise you. And he, I am not content with the word, I want an oath, and also an underwriting with your blood. And I, If obedience wants it, I will do it. He seemed to be all content and added, From the moment I was born, I always kept my heart offered in sacrifice to glorify the Father, for the conversion of sinners, and for the people who surrounded me and who were my most faithful companions in my pains. In the same way, I want your heart to be in this continuous attitude, offering in spirit of sacrifice for these three purposes. While he was saying this, the Queen Mama wanted the baby in order to nourish him with her most sweet milk. I gave him back to her, and she uncovered her breast to place it in the mouth of her divine baby. And I, clever, wanting to make a joke, placed my mouth to suckle. I drew a few drops, and in the act in which I was doing this, they disappeared from me, leaving me content and discontent. May everything be for the glory of God and to the confusion of this miserable sinner. End of the reading. The 25th of December, 1900, the birth of Jesus. As I was in my usual state, I felt I was outside of myself. After wandering around, I found myself inside a cave, and I saw the Queen Mama in the act of giving birth to little baby Jesus. What a wonderful prodigy! It seemed that both mother and son were transmuted into most pure light, but in that light one could see very well the human nature of Jesus, containing the divinity within itself and serving as a veil to cover the divinity, in such a way that in tearing the veil of human nature he was God, while covered by that veil he was man. Here is the prodigy of prodigies, God and man and God, without leaving the Father and the Holy Spirit, because true love never separates. He comes to dwell in our midst, taking on human flesh. Now it seemed to me that mother and son, in that most happy instant, remained as though spiritualized. Without the slightest difficulty, Jesus came out of the maternal womb, while both of them overflowed with excess of love. In other words, those most pure bodies were transformed into light, and without the slightest impediment, light Jesus came out of the light of the mother, while both one and the other remained whole and intact, returning then to their natural state. Who can tell the beauty of the little baby who at the moment of his birth transfused almost externally the rays of the divinity? Who can tell the beauty of the mother who remained all absorbed in those divine rays? And Saint Joseph, it seemed to me that he was not present at the act of the birth, but remained in another corner of the cave, all engrossed in that profound mystery. And if he did not see with the eyes of the body, he saw very well with the eyes of the soul, because he remained enraptured in sublime ecstasy. Now, in the act in which the little baby came out to the light, I had wanted to fly and take him in my arms, but the angels prevented me, saying that the honour of holding him first belonged to the mother. Then the most holy Virgin, as though stirred, returned into herself, and from the hands of an angel received her son in her arms. In her ardour of love she squeezed him so tightly that it seemed that she wanted to draw him into her womb again. Then, wanting to let her ardent love pour out, she placed him at her breast to suckle. In the meantime, I was completely annihilated, waiting to be called so as not to be scolded again by the angels. Then the Queen said to me, "Come, come, and take your beloved, and you too enjoy him. Pour out your love with him." As she was saying this, I drew near Mamma, and she gave him to me into my arms. Who can say my contentment, the kisses, the squeezes, the tendernesses? After I poured myself out a little, I said to him, "My beloved, you have suckled the milk of our Mamma. Share it with me." And he, all condescending, poured part of that milk from his mouth into mine. Then he told me, "My beloved, I was conceived united to suffering. I was born to suffering, and I died in suffering. And with the 3 nails with which they crucified me, I nailed the 3 powers, intellect, memory, and will, of those souls who yearn to love me, keeping them all drawn to myself, because sin had rendered them infirm and dispersed from their Creator without any restraint." As he was saying this, he gazed at the world and began to cry over its miseries. On seeing him cry, I said, "Lovable baby, do not sadden with your tears a night so happy for one who loves you. Instead of pouring ourselves out in crying, let us pour ourselves out in singing." And as I said this, I began to sing. Jesus was amused at hearing me sing, and he stopped crying. And completing my verse, he sang his own, with a voice so powerful and harmonious that all other voices disappeared at the sound of his most sweet voice. After this, I prayed to baby Jesus for my confessor, for all those who belonged to me, and lastly, for everyone. And he seemed all condescending. At that moment he disappeared from me, and I returned into myself. End of the reading. The 25th of December 1908, Volume 8. How to make Jesus be born and grow in your hearts. Finding myself in my usual state, I was longing for little baby Jesus, and after many hardships he made himself seen in my interior as a little baby and told me, "My daughter, the best way to make me be born in one's own heart is to empty oneself of everything, because in finding empty space I can place all my goods in it, and only then can I remain in it forever, if there is room to be able to carry all that belongs to me, all that is my own. A person who went to live in the house of someone else could be called happy only if he found empty space in which to be able to put all of his belongings. Otherwise he would be unhappy. So I am. The second thing in order to make me be born and to increase my happiness is that everything the soul contains, both internal and external, everything, must be done for me. Everything must serve to honour me, to execute my orders. If only one thing, one thought, one word is not for me, I feel unhappy. And while I should be the master, they make me a slave. Can I tolerate all this? The third one is heroic love, magnified love, love of sacrifice. These three loves make my happiness grow in a marvellous way, because they render the soul capable of works which are superior to her strength, as she does them with my strength alone. They will expand her by making not only her, but also others love me, and she will reach the point of enduring anything, even death, in order to triumph in everything, and be able to say to me, I have nothing else. Everything is only for love of you. In this way, she will not only make me be born, but will make me grow and will form a beautiful paradise in her heart. As he was saying this, I looked at him, and from little, in one instant, he became big, in such a way that I remained completely filled with him. Then everything disappeared. End of the reading. The 25th of December 1910, Volume 10. Priests have become attached to families, to interest, to exterior things, etc. This is why it is necessary to have houses of reunion for priests. This morning, blessed Jesus made himself seen as a tiny little one, but so gracious and beautiful as to enrapture me in a sweet enchantment. Especially then he rendered himself more lovable, because with his tiny little hands he took little nails and nailed me with a mastery worthy only of my always lovable Jesus. Then he filled me with kisses and with love, and so I did with him. Then after this, I seemed to find myself in the grotto of my newborn Jesus, and my little Jesus told me, my beloved daughter who came to visit me in the grotto of my birth, only shepherds were my first visitors, the only ones who kept coming and going, offering me gifts and their little things. They were the first to receive the knowledge of my coming into the world, and, as a consequence, the first favourites to be filled with my grace. This is why I always choose poor, ignorant, abject people, and I make of them portents of grace, because they are always the ones to be more disposed, the ones who more easily listen to me and believe me without raising so many difficulties, so many quibbles, as, on the contrary, learned people do. Then came the Magi, but no priest showed up, while they should have been the first to form my cortege. In fact, more than anyone else, according to the scriptures which they studied. They knew the time and the place, and it was easier for them to come to visit me. But no one moved. Rather, while they indicated the place to the Magi, they did not move, nor did they trouble to take one step to follow the traces of my coming. This was a most bitter sorrow for me at my birth, because in those priests the attachment to riches, to interest, to families, and to exterior things was so great as to blind their sight like a glare, harden their hearts, and render their intelligence dazed to the knowledge of the most sacrosanct and most certain truths. They were so engulfed in the low things of the earth as to never be able to believe that a God could come upon earth in the midst of so much poverty and so much humiliation. And this not only at my birth, but also during the course of my life. When I performed the most sensational miracles, no one followed me. On the contrary, they plotted my death and killed me on the cross. And after using all of my art in order to draw them to myself, I put them into oblivion and chose poor and ignorant people as my apostles, forming my church in them. I segregated them from their families. I released them from any bond of riches. I filled them with the treasures of my graces, and I rendered them capable of governing my church and souls. However, you must know that this sorrow of mine is still lasting, because the priests of these times have banded together with the priests of those times. They have been holding hands in their attachments to families, to interests, to exterior things, and they care very little or not at all about that which is interior. Even more, some have degraded themselves so much as to make even secular people understand how unhappy they are with their state, lowering their dignity down to the bottom and below the secular themselves. Ah, my daughter, what prestige can their words still have among the peoples? Even more, because of them, the peoples keep deteriorating in the faith and into abysses of worse evils, groping their way in darkness because they see no more light in priests. This is the reason for the necessity of houses of reunion of priests, so that freed from the mist of darkness by which he is invaded, families, interest, and cares for exterior things, the priest may give out light of true virtues, and the peoples may turn back from the errors in which they have fallen. These reunions are so necessary that every time the church has reached the bottom, this has almost always been the means in order to make her rise again, more beautiful and majestic. On hearing this, I said, "My highest and only good, sweet life of mine, I compassionate your sorrow, and I would like to soothe it with my love, but you know well who I am, how poor, ignorant, bad I am, and also extremely taken with my passion for hiddenness. I would love it if you could hide me so much within you that no one might ever again believe that I existed. And you instead want me to speak about these things, which so much grieve your most loving heart, and which are so necessary for the church. Oh, my Jesus, speak to me, speak of love, and go to other good and holy souls to speak about these things which are so useful for your church." And good Jesus continued, "My daughter, I too loved hiddenness, but there is a time for everything. When the honour and the glory of the Father, as well as the good of souls, became necessary, I revealed myself and I did my public life. So I do with souls. Sometimes I keep them hidden, other times I manifest them. And you must be indifferent to everything, wanting only that which I want. Even more, I bless your heart and your mouth, and I myself will speak in you with my own mouth and with my own sorrow." And so he blessed me, and he disappeared. End of the reading. The 25th of December, 1918, Volume 12. Jesus repeats his life in the soul. Continuing in my usual state, I was feeling all afflicted for many different reasons. And blessed Jesus came and, almost compassionating me, told me, "My daughter, do not afflict yourself too much. Courage, I am with you. Even more, I am just inside you, continuing my life. This is why now you feel the weight of justice, and you would want to unload itself upon you. Now you feel the tearing of the souls who want to be lost. Now you feel restlessness to love me for all. But in seeing that you do not have sufficient love, you flood yourself within my love and take all the love that everyone should give to me. Then, releasing your silvery voice, you love me for all, and all the other things that you do. Do you think you are the one doing it? Not at all. It is I. It is I who repeat my life in you. I feel restless to be loved by you, not with the love of creature, but with my own. Therefore I transform you. I want you in my will because I want to find in you one who compensates for me and for all creatures. I want you like an organ, available to all the sounds which I want to produce. And my love, there are certain times in which my life becomes bitter especially because of the conditions in which you put me." And Jesus, knowing what I wanted to say to him, added, "What do you fear? I will take care of everything. And when one directs you, I give my grace to him. When another does, I give grace to the other. And then it is not you whom they will assist, but me. And I will be generous with them, according to how they will appreciate my work, my sayings, and my teachings." And I, "My Jesus, the confessor appreciated very much what you said to me. He cared very much about it, and he worked very hard to make me right. What will you give to him?" And Jesus, "I will give him heaven as recompense, and I will consider his office as that of Saint Joseph and of my mamma, who, having assisted my life on earth, had to go through hardships in order to nourish me and assist me. Now, since my life is in you, I consider his assistance and sacrifices as though my mamma and Saint Joseph were doing them again for me. Aren't you happy?" And I, "Thank you, O Jesus." End of the reading. The 25th of December 1920, Volume 12. The sacramental lot of Jesus is even harder than his lot as an infant. As I was in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself together with Jesus. I was walking a long way, and on this journey now I walked with Jesus, now I was with my Queen Mama. If Jesus disappeared, I found myself with Mama, and if she disappeared, I found myself with Jesus. During this walk, they told me many things. Jesus and Mama were very affable, with an enchanting sweetness. I forgot everything, my bitternesses and even my privations. I thought I would never lose them again. Oh, how easy it is to forget evil in the face of good. Now, at the end of the walk, the Celestial Mama took me in her arms. I was very, very little, and she said to me, "My daughter, I want to strengthen you in everything." And it seemed that she was marking my forehead with her holy hand, as if she were writing and placing a seal on it. Then it seemed that she was writing in my eyes, in my mouth, in my heart, in my hands and feet, placing a seal upon them. I wanted to see what she was writing, but I could not read that script. Only on my mouth I saw 2 letters, which said, "Annihilation of every taste." And immediately I said, "Thank you, O Mama. You take away from me every taste which is not Jesus." I wanted to understand more, but Mama told me, "It is not necessary for you to know. Trust me, I did to you what was needed." She blessed me and disappeared, and I found myself inside myself. Afterwards, my sweet Jesus came back. He was a tender little baby, wailing, crying, and shivering with cold. He threw himself into my arms to be warmed. I squeezed him so very tightly to myself, and according to my usual way, I fused myself in his will in order to find the thoughts of all with mine and surround shivering Jesus with adorations from all created intellects, in order to find the gazes of all and make all look at Jesus and distract him from crying, in order to find the mouths, the words, the voices of all creatures, that all might kiss him so as not to make him wail, and might warm him with their breath. While I was doing this, the infant Jesus stopped wailing and crying, and as though warmed, he told me, "My daughter, did you see what made me shiver, cry and wail? The abandonment of creatures. You placed them all around me. I felt I was being watched and kissed by all, so I stopped crying. However, know that my sacramental lot is even harder than my lot as an infant. Though cold, the grotto was spacious and had air to breathe. The host too is cold, but so small that I almost lack air. In the grotto I had a manger with a little hay for bed. In my sacramental life I don't even have hay, and I have nothing but hard and ice-cold metals for bed. In the grotto I had my dear Mama, who took me very often with her most pure hands covered me with ardent kisses in order to warm me, soothed my crying, and nourished me with her most sweet milk. In my sacramental life it is all the opposite. I do not have a mama. If they take me, I feel the touch of unworthy hands, which smell like earth and muck. Oh, how I feel their stench, more than the manure I smelled in the grotto. Instead of covering me with kisses, they touch me with irreverent acts. Instead of milk, they give me the bile of sacrileges, of indifference and of coldness. In the grotto, St. Joseph never left me without the light of a little lantern at night. Here in the sacrament, how many times I remain in the dark, also at night. Oh, how much more painful is my sacramental lot. How many hidden tears not seen by anyone. How many wails not listened to. If my lot as an infant moved you to pity, much more should my sacramental lot move you to pity. End of the reading.
All to Jesus I surrender, all to Him I freely give. I will ever love and trust Him, in His presence daily live. I surrender all. I surrender all to Thee, my blessed Savior. I surrender.
The 25th of December, 1921, Volume 13. How the humanity of Jesus was nourished by His will. The souls who live in the divine will surrounded and consoled Jesus at His birth. One who lives in the divine will is the closest to Jesus. As I was in my usual state, my sweet Jesus made Himself seen as a little baby, all numb with cold, and throwing Himself into my arms, He told me, "What cold, what cold! Warm me for pity's sake. Do not let me freeze any longer." I pressed Him to my heart, telling Him, "In my heart I possess your will, so its heat is more than sufficient to warm you." And Jesus, all content, "My daughter, my will contains everything, and one who possesses it can give me everything. My will was everything for me. It conceived me, it formed me, it made me grow, and it made me be born. If my mama contributed by giving me the blood, she could do so because she contained my will, absorbed within her. Had she not possessed my will, she could not have contributed to forming my humanity. Therefore my direct will and my will, which was absorbed within my mama, gave me life. That which is human had no power over me. It could give me nothing. Only the divine will nourished me with its breath and delivered me to the light. But do you think it was the cold of the air that made me freeze? Ah, no, it was the cold of the hearts that made me grow numb, and it was ingratitude that made me cry bitterly at my very first coming out to the light. My beloved mother soothed my crying, although she too cried. Our tears mixed together, and exchanging the first kisses, we poured ourselves out in love. But our life was to be sorrow and crying, so I had her place me in the manger, to go back to crying, calling my children with my sobs and with my tears. I wanted to move them to pity with my tears and with my moans, so as to be listened to. But do you know who was the first after my mama, whom I called with my tears to be close to me in my very manger, to pour myself out in love? It was you, Louisa, the little daughter of my will. You were so little as to surpass my dear mamma in littleness, so much so that I was able to keep you near me in my own manger, and I could pour my tears into your heart. These tears sealed my will in you and constituted you legitimate daughter of my will. My heart rejoiced in seeing all that my will had delivered in creation, coming back as whole in my will within you, Louisa. This was important and indispensable for me. At my very first coming out to the light of this world, I was to restore the rights of creation and receive the glory as if the creature had never departed from my will. Therefore the first kiss and the first gifts of my tender age were for you. And I, my love, how can this be, if at that time I did not exist? And Jesus, in my will everything existed, and all things were one single point for me. I could see you then just as I see you now, and all the graces I have given you are nothing other than the confirmation of what you had been given from eternity. And I could see not only you, but in you I saw my little family, which would live in my will. How happy I felt! These soothed my crying, warmed me, and surrounding me like a crown, defended me from the perfidy of the other creatures. I remained concerned and doubtful. And Jesus, how is it you doubt? I have told you nothing yet about the relations which exist between me and the soul who lives in my will. For now I will tell you that my humanity lived from the continuous outpouring of the divine will. Had I taken one breath alone which was not animated by the divine will, it would have been as though degrading myself and decaying from my nobility. Now the soul who lives in my will is the closest to me, and in everything that my humanity did and suffered, she is the first among all to receive the fruits and the effects that my humanity contains. End of the reading. The 25th of December 1925, Volume 18. The dispositions are needed in order to possess the gift of the divine will. Similes of it. The living in the supreme volition is the greatest thing. It is to live divine life, and the soul operates in the unity of the eternal light. I was thinking about what is said above, that the divine will is a gift, and as gift, one possesses it as one's own. On the other hand, one who does the will of God must submit to commands and ask very often what he must do, and to be lent the gift, not to be owner of it, but to do that action which God wants, and once it is done, give back the gift he had borrowed. Many images and similes formed in my mind about one who lives in the divine volition and possesses it as a gift, and one who does the most holy will of God, who not only does not possess the fullness of the gift, but if he possesses it, it is at intervals and as a loan. I'm going to tell some of those similes. I imagined I had a gold coin, which had the virtue of making arise as many coins as I wanted. Oh, how rich I could become with this gift! On the other hand, someone else receives this gift as a loan for 1 hour, or in order to carry out one action of his, to then give it back immediately. What difference between my riches because of the gift I possess and that of one who receives it as a loan? Or I imagined I would receive the gift of a light which never goes out. So, both at night and during the day, I am safe. I always have the good of seeing this light, which no one can take away from me. It becomes as though a natural part of me, and it gives me the good of knowing what is good in order to do it, and what is evil in order to escape it. So, with this light that I received as a gift, I sneer at all, at the world, at the enemy, at my passions, and even at myself. This light is perennial source of happiness for me. It is without weapons, and it defends me. It is without voice, and it instructs me. It is without hands and feet, and it directs my way. making itself the sure guide to bring me to heaven. On the other hand, someone else has to go and ask for this light when he feels the need for it. Therefore, he does not have it at his disposal. Not being used to always looking with this light, he does not possess the knowledge of good and evil, and has not enough strength to do good and to avoid evil. So not possessing the light, turned on and continuous, in how many deceptions, dangers, and narrow ways does he not find himself? What difference between one who possesses this light as his own gift and one who has to go and ask for it when he needs it? Now, while my mind wandered among many similes, I said to myself, so, the living in the will of God is to possess the will of God, and this is a gift. Therefore, if the goodness of God does not condescend to give it, what can the poor creature do? At that moment, my lovable Jesus moved in my interior as though clasping me all to himself and told me, my daughter, it is true that the living in my will is a gift, and it is to possess the greatest gift. But this gift, which contains infinite value, which is currency that arises at each instant, which is light that never goes out, which is sun that never sets, which puts the soul in her place, established by God in the divine order, and therefore she takes her place of honour and of sovereignty in the creation, is given but to one who is disposed, to one who will not waste it, to one who will esteem it so much and love it more than his own life. Even more, he must be ready to sacrifice his own life, so that this gift of my will may have supremacy over everything, and be held as more than life itself. Even more, his life be nothing compared to it. Therefore, first I want to see that the soul really wants to do my will and never her own, that she is ready to make any sacrifice in order to do mine, and that in everything she does, she always asks me for the gift of my will, even just as a loan. Then when I see that she does nothing without the loan of my will, I give it as gift, because by asking for it over and over again, she has formed the void within her soul in which to place this celestial gift. And by becoming used to living with the loan of this divine food, she has lost the taste for her own will. Her palate has been ennobled and will no longer adapt itself to the vile foods of her own self. Therefore, in seeing herself in possession of that gift which she longed for, yearned for, and loved so much, she will live of the life of that gift. She will love it and will give it the esteem it deserves. Would you not condemn a man who, taken by a childish affection for a child, only to have him around a little bit, to amuse himself with him, would give him a banknote worth of 1,000, and the little boy, not knowing of the value of it, tears it to 1,000 pieces after a few minutes? But if, on the other hand, first he makes the child desire it, then he makes him know its value, then the good which that banknote of 1,000 can do for him, and then he gives it to him, that child will not tear it to pieces, but will go put it under lock and key, appreciating the gift and loving the giver more. And you would praise that man who had the ability to make known to the little child the value of money. If man does so, much more do I, who give my gifts with wisdom, with justice, and with true love. Here is therefore the necessity of the dispositions, of the knowledge of the gift, of the esteem and appreciation, and of love for the gift itself. Therefore knowledge of it is like the herald of the gift of my will, which I want to give to the creatures. Knowledge prepares the way. Knowledge is like the contract I want to make of the gift I want to give. And the more knowledge I send to the soul, the more she is spurred on to desire the gift and to solicit the divine writer to place the final signature, that the gift is hers and she possesses it. So the sign that in these times I want to give this gift of my will is the knowledge of it. Therefore be attentive not to let anything escape you of what I manifest to you about my will, if you want me to place the final signature on the gift which I yearn to give to creatures. After this, my poor mind was wandering in the supreme volition, and I did as much as I could in order to do all my acts in the divine will. I felt invested with the supreme light, and as my little acts came out of me, they took their place within that light and converted into light, and I could see neither the point of the light in which I had done them, nor where to put them. I could only see that they had become incorporated in that endless light and nothing else, and it was impossible for me to navigate through that inaccessible light. To remain inside of it, yes, but to cross the whole of it was not given to my littleness. At that moment, my lovable Jesus moved in my interior and told me, "My daughter, how beautiful is the operating of the soul in my will. Her act unites to the single act of her Creator, which knows no succession of acts. In fact, the eternal light is not divisible, and if it could be divided, which cannot be, the separated part would become darkness. And so, being light, the divine act forms one single act of all her operating. So by operating in the light of my volition, the soul unites herself to that single act of her Creator and takes her place within the atmosphere of the eternal light. This is why you cannot see your acts, either the point of the light in which you perform them or where they are, because it is impossible for the creature to cross the whole of eternal light of God, although she knows that her act is certainly present in that light and takes its place in the past, in the present, and in the future. See, the sun also, being the image of the shadow of the divine light, possesses this property in part. Suppose you were operating in a place upon which the sun spreads its solar light. You see its light in front of you, above you, and behind you, on the right and on the left. If you wanted to see which was the part of the light of the sun that surrounded you completely, you would not be able to find it or distinguish it. You could only say that the light was certainly upon you. Now, that light was there from the first instant in which the sun was created, and it is and will be. If your act could convert into solar light as it converts into divine light, would you be able to find your particle of light and the light which was given to you by the sun in order to let you operate? Certainly not. However, you know that an act has come out of you which was incorporated into the light of the sun. This is why I say that your living in the supreme volition is the greatest thing. It is to live divine life. As soon as he sees the soul in his will, the celestial Creator takes her in his arms and placing her on his lap, he lets her operate with his very hands and with the power of that fiat with which all things were made. He lets all his reflections descend upon the creature in order to give her the likeness of his operating. This is why the operating of the creature becomes light. It unites to that single act of her Creator and constitutes itself eternal glory and continuous praise of her Creator. Therefore, be attentive and let the living in my will be for you your all, that you may never descend from your origin, that is, from the lap of your Creator. End of the reading.
All to Jesus I surrender, humbly at his feet I bow. Worldly pleasures all forsaken, take me, Jesus, take me now.
The 25th of December 1926, Volume 20. How the little baby made himself seen, newly born, by his mama. the light that the little baby sent forth, that gave to everyone the greeting of his coming upon earth. Difference between the grotto and the prison of the Passion. I was anxiously waiting for little baby Jesus, and after many sighs, finally he came, and throwing himself as a little baby into my arms, he said to me, "My daughter, do you want to see how my inseparable mamma saw me when I came out of her maternal womb? Look at me and see." I looked at him, and I saw him as a tiny little baby of a rare and enrapturing beauty. From the whole of his little humanity, from his eyes, from his mouth, from his hands and feet, came out most refulgent rays of light that not only enveloped him, but extended so much as to be able to wound each heart of creature, almost to give them the first greeting of his coming upon earth, the first knock, to knock at the hearts, to have them open and ask for a shelter in them. That knock was sweet but penetrating. However, being a knock of light, it made no clamour, and yet it made itself heard strongly, more than any sound. So on that night, all felt something unusual in their hearts, but very few were those who opened their hearts to give him a little accommodation, and the tender infant, in feeling himself unrequited in his greeting, and that no one was opening at his repeated knocking, began his crying, with his lips livid and shivering with cold. He sobbed, wailed and sighed. But while the light that came out of him was doing all this with creatures, receiving the first rejections, with his celestial mamma, as soon as he came out of her womb, he threw himself into her maternal arms to give her the first embrace, the first kiss. And since his little arms could not reach to embrace her completely, the light that came out of his little hands surrounded all of her in such a way that mother and son remained invested with the same light. Oh, how the Queen Mamma requited her son with her embrace and kiss, in such a way that they remained so clasped to each other as to seem fused one within the other. With her love she compensated for the first rejection the baby Jesus received from the hearts of creatures, and the dear and charming little baby plays his first act of being born, his graces, his first sorrow, in the heart of his mamma, so that what was seen in the son could be seen in his mamma. Then after this the gracious little baby came into my arms, and as he squeezed me so very tightly, I felt him entering into me and I into him. And then he said to me, "My daughter, I wanted to embrace you as I embraced my dear mamma as newly born, so that you too may receive my first act of being born and my first sorrow, my tears, my tender wailings, that you may be moved to compassion for my sorrowful state at my birth. Had I not had my mamma, in whom I could place all the good of my birth, and fix in her the light of my divinity, that I, word of the Father, contained, I would have found no one in whom either to place the infinite treasure of my birth, or to fix the light of my divinity that shone forth from my little humanity. Therefore see how necessary it is that when the Supreme Majesty decides for a great good to be done for creatures that can serve as universal good, we choose one to whom to give so much grace that she may be able to receive within herself all the good that all others must receive. In fact, if others do not receive all of it or part of it, our work does not remain suspended and without its fruit, but the chosen soul receives all of that good within herself, and our work receives the return of its fruit. So my mamma was the depository, not only of my life, but of all my acts. Therefore, in all my acts, first I looked to see whether I could deposit them in her, and then I did them. In her I deposited my tears, my wailings, the cold, and the pains that I suffered, and she echoed all of my acts and with incessant thanksgiving she received everything. There was a contest between mother and son, I in giving, she in receiving. As this little humanity of mine made its first entrance upon earth, my divinity wanted to shine forth from it, in order to go around everywhere and make the first sensible visit to all creation. Heaven and earth all received this visit of their Creator, except for man. They had never received so much honour and glory as when they saw their King, their Maker, within their midst. All felt honoured, for they were to serve him from whom they had received their existence. Therefore all made feast. So my birth was of great joy and glory for me on the part of my mamma and of all creation. But it was for me of great sorrow on the part of the creatures. This is why I have come to you, to feel the joys of my mamma being repeated in me, and to place in you the fruit of my birth. Then after this, I was thinking about how unhappy was that grotto in which little baby Jesus was born, how exposed it was to all winds and to cold, to the point of making one numb with icy cold. Instead of men, there were animals to keep him company. So I thought, which prison was more unhappy and sorrowful, the prison of the night of his passion or the grotto of Bethlehem? And my sweet baby Jesus added, my daughter, the unhappiness of the prison of my passion cannot be compared with the grotto of Bethlehem. In the grotto I had my mamma near me, soul and body, she was with me. Therefore I had all the joys of my dear mamma, and she had all the joys of myself, her son, that formed our paradise. The joys of a mother who possesses her child are great. The joys of possessing a mother are even greater. I found everything in her, and she found everything in me. Then there was my dear father, Saint Joseph, who acted as father to me, and I felt all of his joys that he felt because of me. On the other hand, in my passion, our joys were all interrupted, because we were to give place to sorrow, and between mother and son we felt the great sorrow of the nearing separation, sensible at least, that was to occur with my death. In the grotto, animals recognised me, and honouring me, they tried to warm me with their breath. In the prison, not even men recognised me, and in order to insult me, they covered me with spit and opprobrium. So there is no comparison between the two of them. End of the reading. The 25th of December 1927, volume 23. How baby Jesus, newly born, fixes his gaze on his mamma and on the one who was to possess his will. How in creation God placed his will as raw material. I was feeling all abandoned in the supreme volition, but all tormented by the total privation of my sweet Jesus. Oh, how I felt my poor soul being torn to pieces. What tearings without mercy and without pity, because he who alone can hear tearings so cruel is far away, and seems not to care about she who, for love of him, is so cruelly tormented. But while I was swimming in my sorrow, I was thinking of when my sweet Jesus was about to come out of the womb of his beloved mamma, to fling himself into her arms. Oh, how I too would have wanted to squeeze him in my arms, to form sweet chains for him, so that he might no longer depart from me. But while I was thinking of this, I felt my poor mind outside of myself, and I saw my celestial mamma, all veiled with light, and in her arms little baby Jesus, fused in the same light. But it lasted only a few instants, and then everything disappeared, and I remained more afflicted than before. However, later he came back, and clasping his little hands around my neck, he told me, my daughter, as soon as I came out of the womb of my mamma, I fixed my gazes, one on my dear mamma, nor could I do without looking at her, because in her was the enrapturing force of the divine will, and the sweet enchantment of the beauty and most refulgent light of my fiat, that, eclipsing my pupil, made me remain fixed in she who possessed my very life by virtue of it. Seeing my life bilocated in her enraptured me, and I could not remove my gaze from the celestial queen, because my very divine force compelled me to fix on her. The other gaze I fixed on the one who was to do and possess my will. They were two links connected together, the redemption and the kingdom of my divine will, inseparable from each other. The redemption was to prepare, suffer, do. The kingdom of the fiat was to fulfill and possess, both of them of highest importance. Therefore my gazes were fixed on the chosen ones, to whom both one and the other were entrusted, because there was my very will in them that enraptured my pupil. Why do you fear then, if you have the gaze of your Jesus always looking at you, defending you, protecting you? If you knew what it means to be looked upon by me, you would no longer fear anything. Then afterwards I continued to think about the divine will. My always lovable Jesus added, "My daughter, when our divinity formed the creation, it placed the divine will as raw material in all things, and so all things had their shape, solidity, order, and beauty. And everything the soul does with this raw material of my will, since a vital act flows within it, receives from it the shape of the beautiful works, all ordered and solid, with the imprint of the life of the divine fiat within each work. On the other hand, one who does not do my will and does not put it as raw material in his works might do perhaps many things, but all disordered, without shape, without beauty, all scattered, such that he himself would not know how to make head or tail of them. It would happen as if someone wanted to make bread without water. He might perhaps have much flour, but since the water is missing, the life to form the bread would be missing. Someone else might have many stones in order to build, but does not have the lime that unites and cements the stones together. So he would have a disorder of stones, but never a house. Such are the works without the raw material of my will. They only occupy space. They cause bother, annoyance, and if they do any good at all, it is superficial. If they are touched, they are found to be fragile and empty of any good." End of the reading. The 25th of December 1928, Volume 25. The feast that the little daughter prepares for baby Jesus. How she renders him happy. Adam, first son. Example of the artisan. I was thinking about the birth of baby Jesus, and I prayed him to come to be born in my poor soul. And in order to sing his praises and form a cortege for him in the act of his birth, I fused myself in the holy divine volition, and flowing in all created things, I wanted to animate the heavens, the sun, the stars, the sea, the earth, and everything with my I love you. I wanted to place all created things, as though in waiting, in the act of Jesus' birth, so that all would say to him, I love you, and we want the kingdom of your will upon earth. Now, while I was doing this, it seemed to me that all created things would come to attention in the act of Jesus' birth, and as the dear baby came out of the womb of his celestial mama, the heavens, the sun, and even the tiny little bird, as though all in chorus, were saying, I love you, and we want the kingdom of your will upon earth. My I love you in the divine will flowed within all things in which the divine will had its life, and therefore all sang praises to the birth of their Creator. And I saw the newborn baby, who, flinging himself into my arms, all shivering, told me, what a beautiful feast has the little daughter of my will prepared for me. How beautiful is the chorus of all created things, saying to me, I love you, and wanting my will to reign. One who lives in it can give me anything and can use all stratagems in order to render me happy and make me smile, even in the midst of tears. Therefore I was waiting for you to have a surprise of love of yours by virtue of my divine volition. In fact, you must know that my life on earth was nothing but suffering, operating and preparing everything that was to serve the kingdom of my divine will. That must be kingdom of happiness and possession. Therefore it is then that my works will have their full fruits and will change for me and for creatures into sweetnesses, into joys and into possession. Now while he was saying this, he disappeared from me. But after a little while he came back inside a little cradle of gold, clothed with a tiny little garment of light. And he added, My daughter, today is my birthday, and I have come to render you happy with my presence. It would be too hard for me on this day not to render one who lives in my divine will happy, not to give you my first kiss and tell you I love you as a requital of yours, and clasping you tightly to my little heart, make you feel my heartbeats that unleash fire and would want to burn everything that does not belong to my will. While your heartbeat, echoing within mine, repeats for me your pleasant refrain. May your will reign on earth as it does in heaven. Repeat it always, if you want to render me happy and calm my baby crying. Look, your love has prepared for me the gold cradle, and the acts in my divine will have prepared for me the little garment of light. Aren't you happy? After this I continued my acts in the divine fiat, going back to Eden, into the first acts of the creation of man. And my sweet Jesus moving in my interior told me, My daughter, Adam was the first human son invested by our volition, and his acts were more than sun's rays, that extending and expanding were to invest the whole human family, in which one would see many in one, as though palpitating in these rays, all centralized in the centre of this first human sun. And all were to have the virtue of forming their own sons, without going out of the bond of the first son. In fact, since the life of each one would have its origin from this son, each one would be able to be son of his own. How beautiful was the creation of man! Oh, how it surpassed the whole entire universe! The bond, the union of one in many, was the greatest prodigy of our omnipotence, as our will, one in itself, was to maintain the inseparability of all, the communicative and unifying life of all, symbol and image of our divinity. As we are inseparable, and even though we are three divine persons, we are always one, because one is the will, one is the sanctity, one is our power. This is why man is always looked upon by us as if there were only one, even though he was to have his long generation, but always centralized in the one. It was the uncreated love that was created by us in man, and therefore he was to give of us and be like us. And our will, the only one acting in us, was to act as the only one in man, in order to form the unity of all and the bond of inseparability of each one. Therefore, by withdrawing from our divine fiat, man became deformed and disordered, and no longer felt the strength of the unity and inseparability either with his Creator or with all generations. He felt like a divided body, broken in his members, that no longer possesses all the strength of his body as whole. This is why my divine will wants to again enter as prime act into the creature, to reunite the broken members and to give him the unity and the inseparability as he came out of our creative hands. We find ourselves in the condition of an artisan who has made his beautiful statue, such as to astonish heaven and earth. The artisan loves this statue so much that he has placed his very life in it, so at each act or movement it does, the artisan feels within himself the life, the act, the movement of his beautiful statue. The artisan loves it with love of delirium, nor can he remove his gaze from it. But in so much love, the statue receives an encounter. It bumps, and it remains broken in its members, and in its vital part that kept it bound are united to the artisan. What will his sorrow not be? And what will he not do in order to redo his beautiful statue? More so since he still loves it, and to the raving love has added the grieving love. Such is the state the divinity is in with regard to man. He is our delirium of love and of sorrow, for we want to redo the beautiful statue of man, and since the bump that took place in the vital part of our will that he possessed, once our will is re-established in him, the beautiful statue will be redone for us, and our love will be satisfied. Therefore I want nothing else from you but my divine will to have its life. Then he added with a more tender note, my daughter, in the created things, the divinity did not create love, but the flowerings of his light, of his power, of his beauty, etc. So it can be said that in creating the heavens, the stars, the sun, the wind, the sea, the earth, it was our works that we issued, and the flowerings of our beautiful qualities. Only for man was this greatest prodigy of creating the life, and the life of our love itself. And this is why it is said that he was created in our image and likeness. And this is why we love him so much, because it is life and work that has come out of us, and life costs more than anything. End of the reading.